Wait, what does being single have to do with?
Well, so I told her, I was like, I've been in relationships, so what am I supposed to do? Just sit there and look pretty? Like, what do you think I do with them? Like, obviously I'm having sex. And so she's like, oh, you'll never change, da 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 da. And I'm like, no, you need to get laid. That's what happens, is that you need to
Take out your chart. Here's what we're actually going to do. Not the prostitute archetype, although we can look at it because it could be the shadow, but we're going to do the shadow.
So then
I don't know what you have on your descendant.
She was like,
I'm gonna go get my chart.
Okay.
she's like, you look like, you're like a dog or whatever. And I'm like, that's right. In your eyes, I'll always be a dog. And it's okay.
But
I accept it.
this is perfect. And I want you to listen when you talk to people about the part that they're shunning. Remember, anything that's 0 to 100 or all or none is going to be some aspect of the shadow. But mainly when someone refuses to acknowledge a part of themselves.
Right.
Your mother, after your dad died, basically re-virginized herself
That's
and
what
gave
she
herself over to Jesus.
She was like, I've been without your father for 8 years, and you haven't seen me with not one man. And I've
And
gotten
she's
hit out
priding
by this.
herself
I'm like, that's
on
fine.
being quote unquote virginal.
Yeah.
So what archetype, and you can use religious archetypes because those are archetypes as well.
Yeah.
What archetype is she embracing?
The sainthood archetype.
The saint or the Mother Mary,
Yeah.
the virgin archetype.
Which is what she
So
said. that
what's
she's
the
going to-
opposite? What's the opposite of the virgin?
The prostitute.
The prostitute.
Yep.
And this is the part of her that she's negating.
Mm-hmm.
The part of you that you negate is your shadow or on the chart, your descendant. So go to your chart and there's an arrow here. It's this sign here. It's on the 7th. So this is the descendant.
Okay, so I need help because I don't know what.
Okay, so this is the ascendant. I'll go around and tell each of you. So how do we get the shadow from this? On the day of your birth, the way that the sun was rising, the sun rises like this. This is midnight. The sun rises, this is 6 a.m., and the sun comes out. This is the sunset. So the sunrise is the part of us that we show, it's light, the sun is out. We show this to the world. But the sunset is the shadow or the descendant that we hide. That part of us that we hide, that we negate, is the descendant. This keeps us from individuation. Okay, Libra. That means you're an Aries ascendant.
Wait, is that in the 7th or in the 6th? Because the 7th house is this one.
Right, but the line is here.
Oh, okay, so it's.
Okay, so you're hiding that diplomacy, that feminine, that people pleaser. You're like a freaking warrior, an Aries ascendant. You're, So that's the part of us that we need to integrate. If we fail to integrate the shadow, we can never really have individuation. So this is Jung. And Jung said that this is like the whole of the person. Think of it as the chart. If you only integrate certain things, then you're not a full person. You have to integrate every single thing in you, every part of you, the good and the bad, in order to be a whole individuated person. That is the purpose of life. According to Jung, the first half of life, and this is why there's a midlife crisis, the first half of life, you're only integrating the things that you can identify in yourself. The things that are conscious, the things that maybe you observe, the things that you were taught, and you go through life like this warrior, like a go-getter, like, you know, in your double Capricorn self, you know, ambitious and all of that stuff. And you're gonna get to that because that's that first part of life. Then at midlife, and that comes for everyone differently, but according to astrology, 48 to 52. In that midlife crisis, it's when you realize, oh shit, there's this whole side of me that I have either been neglecting, denying, not wanting to recognize, and now I realize I am that. Namely, in my language, mother and father. There's bad buckets. And you have a nervous freaking breakdown. So what's the typical thing that men during a midlife crisis do?
Cheat.
They cheat, they get a sports car, they go to the beach with a Speedo. Ridiculous. They're trying to grasp at their youth. Why youth?
Because it's more appealing.
Okay, but what else? What happens during youth?
You're more free to do what you want to do.
Okay, you think you are, but that's exactly what teenager is. It's that chaos, that freedom, that independence. Part of becoming an individual and part of accepting yourself as a whole is realizing that you're just like everyone else. Shoot me. I, Queen of the universe, King of the lands, I, who's gonna save the world, is just like every other person. That is the worst thing to realize. That at its core is the midlife crisis. And usually, I know it sucks, you're gonna realize that. One thing is me telling you, and one thing is you going through it. I am a believer that you kinda have to suffer and go through pain and experiences in order to get it. Maybe there's a handful of people that don't, that really can see you going through something and say, oh, I don't want to do that. But for the most part, most people are going to put their hand on the stove and say, oh shit, that's hot, and learn with that experience. Usually we cannot translate the learned information onto another human being. It's not my belief system. I think that most people go through the pain and suffering and then say, oh, I get it, okay? And this is part of this. If at birth, when you're born, you are undifferentiated, a baby doesn't really recognize that there's any difference between him and the mother, okay? Doesn't have that consciousness. Then what happens at 2? They start saying, me, mine. And the child starts to recognize that there's them and there's you. No, I'll do it. No, right? Doesn't Josiah do that? No. And the reason that they do no, me, you know, like there's a you, there's a me, is because they're developing a boundary. And the boundary is a sense of self. And a boundary is an ego. If I didn't have a body, and you didn't have a body, or I did not respect your personal space or your body, I would be harming you. That's illegal. I must respect you personally as a body. That's what the child is trying to do. They're trying to differentiate themselves from the mother. Because prior to 2 years old, especially at birth, there's no differentiation because we come from the womb where there's no differentiation. I am one with her. And therefore, the child needs to start developing an I. I am me and you are you. I will decide what I'm going to wear. I am going to decide X, Y, Z. And children start to lie. Why do children start to lie? Because your kid's going to start lying.
Oh no, he already does.
Okay.
The whole, nothing, mommy, I didn't do nothing.
Right.
I'm like,
So what is the
fuck
function of the child needing to lie?
Is it a mechanism of of them getting their way in a sense?
But what would be, think psychologically, if all behavior leads to it's irrational, and we understand that the subconscious is irrational. But if the subconscious is irrational but thinks it's rational, what would be a rational reason for him needing to learn to lie? What is the function? Remember how I say what's the function of that organ in order for you to understand what psychological reason the person is processing? What's the function of Josiah learning to lie or lying?
To get out of trouble?
Well, there's definitely a survival mechanism there, but no. If I need to differentiate, remember, we're talking about individuation, we're coming full circle. Excuse me. I need to differentiate myself from mom. This is survival of the organ, of the organism, of the person, okay? At birth or at pregnancy, they're one, right, in the womb. Then they're birthed, but the child is unconscious. He does not recognize that he has separated from the mother, and that's why he, wants the boob and holds on and don't let go of me. And then you've got your terrible twos, where they start developing this self and this ego and these boundaries, and then around 3, they start to lie. Because lying serves the function of stop reading my mind. Go to the bathroom, you have to pee. Drink water, you're thirsty. Take a jacket, you're going to be cold. And that kid is like, how the fuck does this person know?
My every move.
Everything! And so he or she says, what's the mechanism? Astrologically, it's Mercury. Wherever you see Mercury, you have a tendency to lie, or Gemini. And we all have Mercury and we all have Gemini. That's where you realize, that's the beauty of astrology. We all have it. There's nothing that any of you don't have that I don't have. Like I told you that about my daughter. If I'm telling her, it's because I got it. We have to get to that understanding. At least basic therapy 101. If you're seeing it in your client, you have it. If you're seeing it in someone else, you have it. Okay. It might be a flip-flop where she's the prostitute archetype and mom's the virgin archetype, but they're the same sides, they're different sides of the same coin. That's what we're listening for in counseling, because people will speak in one side. And you can see that on the chart easily with what's called oppositions. We'll get to that. So the child needs to say, I must differentiate myself from my mother or my caregiver, and if I lie, then I'm making a difference. Oh, you don't know what I'm thinking. You don't really have me figured out. So I was sharing with Ms. Rapace yesterday that in my marriage, in my second marriage, I was Miss Psychic. I knew everything. That's not good. That is not a good strategy for a marriage. Okay? So I would see everything because I had clairvoyance and premonitions and this and this and that. And I'd be like, this is going to happen, and it would happen. This is going to happen. This would happen. Why the hell would anybody want to be with another person that is telling them everything? It's like going back to freaking pregnancy, the womb, childhood. Who would want that? I'm not a wife, I'm your fucking mother. Wrong. Wrong, not good. Like I tell all of my clients, my daughter especially, do not therapize your spouse, your partner. That is not our role. Do not do it. It does not serve us in any way, and women like to do that. We have a tendency to want to do that. Don't. That is not what is healthy in a marriage. Ironically, the sign on the descendant also rules the sign of the marriage. Why? Because in your marriage and the problems that show up are the same things from childhood or the shadow or the aspects of yourself you don't see that you need to work on. And now you've left home, you need to work on them with your partner. And of course, a very common thing is mother-child, little, in your marriage, you can be mother-child. Not recommended, but unfortunately very common. We see this dynamic in marriages. So we're repeating these patterns from childhood. So that's why Josiah is like, I didn't do it, because you don't know everything. Who are you? Because remember, children up until 7 believe that their parents are God. It's a superhero archetype. They know it all. They're all powerful. They tell me what's good, they tell me what's bad. They can obviously read my mind, not because we can read the kid's mind, but because we've been there and we're older. It's just exactly when we're like my age, that you look to a mentor or you look for someone professionally as a mentor, as a teacher or something, because they've already been there. I teach you because I've already been in your seat. So I can give you some insight to being a student and a new therapist because I've already been there. Not because I'm omniscient or omnipotent or anything. It's simply because I've already walked the walk. That's why we listen to older people. That's why we respect authority. Because they've already done it, so they've already gotten beat down, they've already learned the lessons, they've already done the trial and error. Why do you have to pasar trabajo when I'm telling you I already did it? Because we're human. And we want to, at the core, have an ego and have a self and have an individuation, a differentiation, I should say, as we go through life. And then, what happens? Life beats us down. Every 7 years, Saturn shows us that we don't know anything, all the stuff we've been talking about. And then we hit a midlife crisis. Oh my God, I am not different. I am not better. I am not going to save the world. And oh shit, I am like everybody else. Midlife crisis.
I think that's why when I ended up homeless, like growing up, I was given everything. So
I was just going to say, being homeless is like a shadow.
Yeah.
I was given everything, so I have to do it opposite.
Right.
Let me end up homeless. No one can beat me there. Then I'm not like everybody else.
Yeah, so,
see how fucked up the subconscious is?
So, like, I would be on POF and like all the dating sites and stuff, and I would talk to guys. This was while I was still home and like in school and doing right in a way. And I would talk to them, and when they would tell me, oh, I don't have a car, and they're like 30 years old, I'm like, oh my God, you don't have a fucking car? Like, what? You're a fucking bum. Like, where the hell? And so when I turned homeless, and now I'm in their position, I realize I'm like, oh shit, like, I'm really not any better than the next person. Like,
but what you were rebelling about, if homeless is this thing that you turned into, that your mom says, how did you turn out homeless when you had a home, when you were given everything? Bless you. What were you rebelling against? What's the other side of the coin? This is what I want you to start listening to with people, because because it's what's going to give you the insight to your client. What are you rebelling here? What's the other side of homeless?
My whole thing.
What?
Having
Well, you don't necessarily have to be wealthy to be homeless, but
my whole thing, my whole rebellious came is because I wanted independence. I wanted my independence.
Perfect. And of course the client has a reason. But home. What's the characteristic of being homeless? You don't have a home. You're not confined to a building.
Yeah.
No little building. So what she heard somewhere in her psyche, in her story, that's why each client is the same, but each client is different and is an individual. I might have wanted freedom and did it a different way. My daughter wanted freedom and it was her car. My daughter's symbol of freedom is her car. And have I never seen this girl take care of anything the way she takes care of her car? And when she lost her car keys, she like lost it. Oh my God, because it's her symbol of freedom. For you, opposite side of the coin, home was a restraint. So therefore, what you heard is, if I have a home, I'm restrained, I'm conditioned, I'm limited, I'm not free. Therefore, in order to have no restraints, independence, get rid of the home. Was it the home that was restricting her? No. But home is an archetype. The archetype is mother, child, safety, protection, limitation, because we have the limitation of the actual building. What else is home an archetype of? Nurturance.
I have it in my head, but I don't have it in words.
Rules, absolutely. What else? You think of home.
Security.
Okay, safety, protection is security.
Stability.
Okay, stability.
Love.
Absolutely. Love. Again, not every home is the same, but this is the archetype. Remember, an archetype is that image that is conjured up when you hear a word, like I told you the other day, nerd, and you see the nerd with the tape and all that. When you think of home,
family.
You think of family. So what you were rebelling against was this. Now on this list, what were you rebelling against? Your mother.
Mm-hmm.
And guess which sign, no coincidence, is home? Cancer. And the opposite sign of Cancer, which we'll get to opposites in a minute, is Capricorn. In order for her to become an individual, she has to deny her Cancer part. Not only was she a child, but she's now a mother. How confusing is that? I am denying this, yet I am that. I am a child, which it's like hates being this woman's child. Subconsciously, this makes perfect sense to me. I know, because of course astrologically it gives me the archetypes really clear. You're going to hear it, unless you learn astrology, you're going to hear it in the conversation that the client says. So she's rebelling as much about being a child as she is about being a mother. Same archetype. Same archetype. Childhood and motherhood restrain her. Don't allow her independence and freedom. And it makes sense because the opposite sign of Cancer is Capricorn, which is what she is. So our opposite sign is a restraint restricting sign. It's going to give us limits. Every single person has an opposite sign. We have the opposite of the ascendant, which is the sun, which is what we show the world, is the shadow. This is the first big problem we have. We want to keep this hidden. The sun, your sun sign, has an opposite sign. Emmanuel is a Cancer, so Capricorn is your opposite sign. Sam's a Libra, so Aries is your opposite sign. Yvette, what's your sign? Aries, so Libra. You're Capricorn. You're Gemini, so Sagittarius. Carmen, you're Aries?
No, Gemini.
Gemini? Okay, so Sagittarius is your opposite. That means that you are rebelling against the opposite of what you are. However, if you look on your chart, you're going to see something that looks like this. Not an X, a cross. This is Earth. You're going to look for your sun. What sign are you, Stacey?
Aquarius.
Aquarius, so that's Leo. You're going to look for the sun, very easy, and there's going to be a line that connects the sun and the earth. This is your sun.
Green.
It's green, yes, it's green. The sign of this cross with the circle that represents earth is the opposite sign. Where were you born? In the heavens or on earth? On earth. The sign opposite you is the sign you are actually born into. And you must become the sun. So you're actually a Sagittarius, metaphorically speaking. And you're climbing your way up to becoming this Gemini. It confines you.
So the
Because
opposite,
everything on earth is confining.
so the opposite sign is still part of you too?
A huge part, but it's part of the shadow. That's exactly right. Great question. So you have different shadows on your chart. The first shadow is going to be the sign of your earth. So unfortunately, this beautiful woman over here is Pisces. And she meets the crazy Pisces that doesn't let go of her. She can't shake me. Not because she needs me, but because she's got to confront the Piscean part of herself. So that's why the opposite sign in karmic language, in Eastern philosophy language, is karmic. So mine is Virgo, and lo and behold, we find each other.
So that's why opposites attract.
Opposites attract, and we're going to talk about all opposites in the chart. The second aspect of the shadow is the 7th house cusp. It's called your descendant. First, you have to understand the ascendant. The ascendant is a part of you you show to everyone. It's your personality. Remember I told you it's your personality? And it has to do with your body and everything you show the world. I'm very comfortable in my ascendant. Therefore, I want to hide my descendant. The qualities of that sign. So I don't want the qualities of my earth sign. I'm a Gemini. How dare I want to be a Sagittarius? You have Sagittarius people you don't like because your face is saying it's like gross. And your ascendant opposite is your descendant, another shadow. So in your chart, there's an inner circle that has a bunch of lines and squares and triangles and stuff. You want to look for the circle that has lines that go across. All the lines that you have going across are what are called oppositions.
Are you talking about the big circle?
In the middle, the little circle, you see that in the center? Those are oppositions. It's red.
Yeah.
They're red lines.
Oh, red lines.
They might have little circles, but they're red lines. And you don't have to look at those lines. You can look at the entire chart and you can see one planet here and one planet right across. Anything that you have right across from each other are called oppositions. In that person's life, the oppositions show up as a shadow. Opposition